Hello my friends, we are talking today about N690. This is a steel that I haven't had a great deal of on my channel. And so I've got this knife here, I've done a couple of cut tests with it, and I'm going to talk about how it performed, and I'm going to talk generally about N690 and its place in the knife world. But to front load the information with what you might want to see when you clicked on the video, I did 2 edge retention tests on this knife here. This is a Kizer Mini Gemini, and I believe it is at 60 Rockwell hardness. The N690, I'll put the recipe on the screen. It is a 440C family of steel, and it cut with Gabe's Edge, which was a dual grit, I think rough side 320, polished side 3000, at about 16 degrees per side, cut 250 times. Which is a pretty good result, pretty comparable to other higher end budget steels. And then my own edge, where I sharpened it again at 17 degrees per side with a high polish, 11,000 11,000 grit finish on my TS Prof, cut 275 to 300 times. I could have probably stopped at 275, I gave it another 25. Probably statistically meaningless given that this is a backyard endeavor to the result from Gabe's Edge. Just generally showing a rough, spot that sits. Thinking Magna Cut, right, the current sort of industry standard at about that degrees with a good heat treatment will cut about 800 times through the rope. It definitely sits about where you would expect a budget, non-powdered, pretty simple steel to sit. That is pretty well, in the, half as good at edge retention as a really modern state-of-the-art steel. It seems about right to me anyway. Again, a lot of things I will say from my experience, I'm pretty fast and loose with because I understand a lot of my endeavor is just me alone in my house cutting rope. It's not as scientific as like Larrin Thomas's Catricard cuts that him and Sean do, for example. At any rate, that's the front-loaded information. That's how it did, and that's kind of roughly how it compares to Magna Cut, for example, is a steel that everyone currently knows. But where does N690 sit for me? I've never really been drawn to it that much because I would often see it on very expensive, unreasonably so expensive European knives. Fox Knives, Extrema Ratio, Mazarin, companies like that routinely selling $400 knives in N690, and I've never seen the value proposition as fair. I'm not saying I'm right. Some people just don't care. And there's a valuable school of thought that's like, if someone broke into your house, waved a magic wand over all your knives, and they all went presto, they're VG10. But you can't tell how long through your use would it be until you noticed. That might not be an easy question to ask for people who, like me, shop for steel, because the answer may be a bit hard to stomach. So at any rate, I'm not saying I'm right, but I'm saying when I see a $400 knife, I want the steel to be a little bit more modern than a 440C class of steel. So what's a 440C class of steel? Well, 440C was once the best blade steel in the 1970s. And back when there was either carbon steel, stainless steel, or tool steel. Those were your 3 options, right? And stainless steels, 440C was the king. It was a real improvement over 420, 440A, had about 1% of carbon in it and some chromium to keep it stainless. And overall, it stayed about the industry leader for a good, 15 to 20 years. Eventually, 154cm would segue in from the aerospace industry, do things a little bit better, but 440C for a while was king, and as such, it produced its sister steels from other knife making areas. So Japan, you get VG10. Europe, you get N690. There are others, but those are the mains. China, eventually, 9CR18 MOV, fairly similar to 440C. So that's roughly what you're looking at. Mid-priced steel at best. Spyderco probably selling VG10 for maybe a little bit more, but using, a recognized brand and arguably a pretty high quality product to, still justify VG10, another 440C class of steel being sold at a decently high price for their Japanese, FRN handled knives. But at any rate, those steels are usually seen as budget knife steels now. So I still do kind of balk at seeing them in these expensive, European, Italian knives. especially N690. So, you know, when I look at extreme ratio and see like one of their cell vans in N690 at 58 Rockwell hardness, I just can't help but think for that price, that should be 3V. And I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but that's kind of why I've never really had much to do with N690, because it's only been recently that it's been coming out in, you know, more budget offerings. So this little Kaiser Mini Gemini, definitely a lower cost knife. Kaiser still does a titanium and S35 VN version, I believe. This, I think, is aluminium and N690. You know, an absolutely fine knife for under $100. That's the thing, these knives all sort of, the industry's changed, and I think that's how a lot of people are enjoying knives. And again, it comes back to a bit that sort of thought about how much does it actually matter what your steel is, because I think a lot of these knives are going to be carried and used quite occasionally, and probably just being bought as like a, you know, a bit of an itchy trigger finger, felt like buying something that had some spare money that pay week kind of purchase. Most, I would say, sub $100 knives are being used for that. Some of them will be used for complete beater knives, so absolutely used to the nth degree. And I guess even on those, they're probably never going to be meticulously sharp either. So true collector's knives, probably the best application for mid-tier steel, really, is when like you're a bulk knife collector and you're buying like the next, you know, Kaiser that's coming out every week, or the next Civivi, or the next Real Steel, or whatever. And it probably doesn't matter to you really how good the steel is, because it's never going to be your like main, it's never going to be what my stretch 2 is to me. Like a proper main knife that gets so much use that the edge retention does actually matter to me. And not every knife in my collection is this either. Like that's not me for all of my knives as well. Anyway, just some running commentary on where I think a steel like N690 fits in, you know, the current knife world, and where it's fair to sort of sit. I personally wouldn't really want to pay more than $100 for this steel. Some caveats. Custom knife makers, I'm aware, still use N690, and that is totally fine. You charge what you want. If you're hand making a knife, you're putting artisanal quality and, you know, a personality into that piece, that you can charge whatever you think is fair, and I guess most importantly, what someone else is happy to pay. No worries at all. These steels are still better than the other class of budget knife steels that you get, the 440A Deviant steels. So, you know, you're thinking AUS 8, remember that? That used to be in everything. 8CR, 13 MOV, those are sister steels of 440A, which is an even older, even less, you know, less impressive steel. And again, not bad, but just don't pay too much for those. I would pay gladly more. I'd pay more for this batch of steels than the 440A batch of steels. I'd pay about the same amount for these steels as I would for like the other budget steels at the moment, which is that family of Nitro V, AEBL, and 14C28N. And it's not surprising, because you see all those used pretty interchangeably through all these Chinese companies. Obviously, they get them all for about the same price per kilo, and you know, they're pretty much, they seem to be just swapping and chopping and changing them per new knife model. So there you go. So overall, N690, absolutely fine stuff. There are no bad steals when it comes to reputable knife companies, only bad deals. And I think as long as you're not spending more than $100, you're getting a fine deal for your N690. It's going to perform just fine if you put a good fine edge in it. I would recommend going full high polish. That to me feels like the best way this performs. 17 degrees. Again, all of these steels are going to hold 17 degree per sides without falling apart, I think. Again, the only place you're really going to get a shit steel these days, guys, is I think going into like your local bong shop and, you know, getting one of the ones that's under the counter with like, it's got, you know, skulls all over it, that sort of thing. Those are going to be your actual bad steels these days. I think anything that's made by an actual branded knife company, it's going to be fine as long as you have in your head an acceptable sort of tiering of what you're happy to spend. And I guess all it's ever been with N690 and me is that I've never been happy to spend that several hundred of dollars on what is a steel that is pretty old, and in what could, for their purposes, be replaced by something a little bit more modern, and without really changing the price too much, seeing what other American, Japanese, Chinese companies are doing. So at any rate, that's my little thoughts on N690. It's absolutely fine, but just don't pay too much for it.